I'm Brittany.
And I'm Heather.
Welcome to Okayest Moms, the podcast.
A place to be more than just mom.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Okayest Moms, the podcast. Brittany here.
And Heather, we are hopefully going to be taking the awkwardness out of a very awkward conversation today. We're talking birds and bees and kids with Amy Lang.
I think it's always going to be awkward, but at least you'll feel more prepared after this conversation.
Yes, and Amy kind of touches on that, how it's going to always kind of be a little weird, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to make it a weird thing. The goal is to have a productive adult, and hopefully that goal in mind takes the weirdness out of it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Have you had talks with your kids at all?
Here and there. So Amy mentions this idea of like thousands of 2-minute conversations. And that made me, I felt like I got a gold star in parenting today, because I feel like that's all we've done is like these quick little like flybys. And I'm noticing as my kids are getting older that I'm kind of like leaving the door open for more of these conversations. Like when I'm on my period, I'm usually like closing doors, which like we're a very like open door bathroom house anyway, but I'm noticing like I'm a little more private when I'm on my period, because when I had toddlers who are already in my business while I'm going to the bathroom, it was just like, mom needs a minute. And now I feel like as they're getting older and can handle a little bit more of this, I'm kind of like just leaving the door open, or maybe just like throwing the tampon in the garbage and not like wrapping it up in 1,000 rolls of toilet paper so they don't see anything. Because kind of like planting little seeds to invite these conversations, because it hit me the other day. Some girls get their periods at 9, 10, some 8. Like I feel like it's like coming around the corner for us, and I feel like my daughter isn't prepared. And also like there's the whole part of like what she can cognitively handle, and like that whole part, and it just feels like everything's happening at once. So I have been trying to encourage more conversations lately.
Yeah, I love that. And I was really, for some reason I had it in my head, like, wait until they ask these questions.
Right.
And that's more or less what we've done. But really, Amy talks about this more in depth, but we are in charge, like they don't necessarily know which questions to ask. And, of course, there's all these developmental stages where certain language is more appropriate and whatever when they're younger. So that just was kind of like a light bulb moment for me, like, oh shit, maybe I'm not doing as good as I thought.
Well, I mean, that's with anything, right? But there are still thousands of 2-minute conversations in your future.
That's
so
very, very
there's time. Although middle school is knocking on your door,
God,
stop. Good luck.
I want to tell you this funny story where, so in 4th grade, that's when the girls get the period talk and see the video or whatever it is nowadays. And when Harrison was in 4th grade, his teacher told the class that the girls get to go on a field trip, but the boys are not ready yet. And Harrison got in the car after this conversation with his teacher and was like so mad, like threw his backpack, like, we don't get a field trip and the girls do. So Harrison was so mad that he didn't get to go on this field trip. And we had just watched Turning Red and had the period talk about what happens to women and what happens to me every month and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, Harrison, remember we just talked about this. That's what they're going to learn about, because some girls might not know yet or whatever. This is standard. And he's like, oh. And then he wasn't so disappointed, but
it's
anyway.
A field trip you don't want to go on.
Right.
Well, and also I think having a boy and a girl, I've realized that these aren't specific conversations. And I hate that they still break it up by gender in school, because everybody needs to know about this. Like at some point, a boy in that class is probably going to have a girlfriend or a wife or have a daughter. Like at some point they're going to encounter a period and they should know.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just, yeah.
50% of the population menstruates. Like why would they not know about it? Yeah. No,
Well, and I don't,
that's a whole
this
nother.
is something like specific to our district. When I was growing up, we were all together. Like we watched all the
Oh.
videos. It was like a whole week of like traumatization, but it was like, but we were together. So we trauma bonded over all of it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I
Wow,
mean,
no, ours were separated.
which made for some awkward recesses in fourth grade because now like these boys that you were playing kickball with, you're like, what happens to you? What? But you know, it's important information to know regardless of your sexual orientation, your gender. Like at some point you are going to encounter these things with another human being and
Mhm.
you should know about them. So I think that's important to remember as you're having these conversations with your kids too. And Amy's got lots more good little gems for you. So put this on your New Year's resolution list. Start having these weird conversations. Be the weird mom who talks about sex with your kids, and because that's what's going to make them better, well-rounded adults. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we will be back with Amy. If you're feeling the new year, new you vibe, and your goal is to get organized once and for all, then you need an essential calendar.
We've both been using an essential calendar for the past few years, and their unique design allows you to see 3 months at a glance. This makes planning so much easier and guarantees that you make time for all the things you want to do, not just things you have to do.
And new to the shop this year is the Year at a Glance calendar. If you like to see your whole year mapped out, this sleek, minimalist design is perfect for you.
You can get 10% off your order from the Essential Calendar by going to okayestmoms.com/essential. That's okayestmoms.com/essential.
We'd like to introduce podcast sponsor Dry Farm Wines. Dry Farm Wines is a wine club that sources natural wines from small family farms that grow organic grapes. Each wine is dry farmed, meaning no irrigation, low alcohol, below 12.5% ABV, sugar-free, lower in sulfites, free of toxic additives, and is keto, paleo friendly, and vegan.
Which is a fancy way of saying that you can enjoy the crisp, refreshing taste of a Sauvignon Blanc or the warm, fruit-forward taste of an Old Vine Zin without the icky feeling the next morning.
If you know what we mean. Dry Farm Wines offer memberships for reds, whites, or a mix of both that can be edited or canceled at any time.
To order Dry Farm Wines, go to dryfarmwines.com/okayestmoms to order. And if you sign up for a membership through our link, you'll get an extra bottle of wine for a penny with your first order. That's dryfarmwines.com/okayestmoms. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to y'all.
Can you tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. I have a weird job. So I was a sexuality educator throughout my 20s and 30s, and I was just doing the usual, STI, birth control, abortion, counseling kind of deal. Loved it. And then had made an assumption that when I had children that I was going to be amazing. And I was not. I was very surprised by my discomfort. And I realized that that was not a real good thing because, I'm like, hey, this is what I do for fun. And so I started doing some research and figured out, how to have the conversations for our family. Milo was about 5 when I started doing this. And then I also have a master's degree in applied behavioral science, and my focus was in adult education. So I just combined my two favorite things and started Birds and Bees and Kids in a long time ago, 2006, I think. And so, as you can imagine, my child has been mortified by my work, but he's 12 now, and so I know, but he's much better about it. So that's like my work business. So I live in Seattle, and I've been married to the same person for 30 years next year. And, we lucked out, and Milo was super easygoing guy, and he seems happy and healthy, and he's living with his girlfriend in Bellingham, Washington, and doing his thing. So yeah. And, we're having crazy weather. It is supposed to be gloom and doom here. And
I
it
don't know
is
how you do it.
brilliant sunshine, like crazy town, brilliant sunshine. So,
Oh,
and you just hunker down and wait,
yeah.
right?
We're in California, so we don't really know much about rain and things like that.
Yeah. So we're experiencing California, only it is like 37 degrees. So, not the same. It's not. Yeah. So that's my tale. That's my tale. And I've been really having a great time doing this work. I really love my whole mission is to help kids grow up to be whole, healthy, happy adults. And I just need, parents to do that.
Easier said than done. I mean, the birds and bees discussion it is so intimidating, and I feel like now with the generation that we're raising, it's starting so much earlier. It's not just like this one time sit down talk that our generation may or may not have had with our parents or with like our fifth grade teacher who played a video. So can you tell us at what age parents should start talking to their kids about the birds and the bees?
Yeah. So this is the eternal question. Like, when should we have these conversations? And honestly, regardless of what the kind of climate and culture is around sexuality, and you're right, it's gotten way more amped up. The ideal time, and sometimes people are a little like taken aback by this, but the ideal time really, to get the penis and vagina, the usual way babies are made, business out of the way, is about 5 and super young, right? Super young, but there are legit reasons for this. So first of all, if you can kind of take yourself out of the equation and just think about 5-year-olds and 5-year-old life. They're super curious. They're really open. They don't know what we know about sex and relationships. They don't know there's anything amazing, fun, cool about it. They don't know that there's anything yucky, bad, embarrassing, shameful, ideally. And so they come into these conversations just open. Like, I think about them as an empty vessel. And then we have this great opportunity to fill them up with values-based, accurate sexuality information. And they're, so that's them. And they're starting kindergarten, right? I mean, I just had, by the way, I'll just say all the things, so watch out. So I just had a mom email me because her 6-year-old, no, 6 or 8-year-old just asked her what 69 means.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so she's like, I did this and I didn't do very well. Now what do I do? So if your child already, I mean, I don't recommend telling, an 8-year-old what 69 is, but so if you've already established that you talk about these things in your family, and they know we start with biology or reproduction, right? Because it's just an easy place. It's just science, right? It's just science. And so that makes it easier for us to to talk about stuff that's harder. It's also, when you start sooner, it's so much easier. They don't notice your sweaty upper lip and your glass of wine while you're reading a book with them. They're not going to cue into that. Your 12-year-old is going to be like, what is up? You're being weird. So the other piece, and I did not know this, and is that the sooner you start having conversations with kids about sex and bodies and boundaries and using the correct names for private body parts, which that's the first sex talk, actually. They're safer. They're safer from sexual abuse. They're safer from predators. And if you think about, if you're having a big family friend dinner and your 4-year-old pipes up and says, Mom, my vulva itches at the top of their lungs, the whole room will go silent. And if there is a creepster in the room, they're going to think, okay, I'm not messing with that kid because their parents are talking to them. So it's protective. It's protective. And when you're sooner rather than later, you establish that this is a normal part of your family life. They may not like it, but who cares? Welcome to life, right? To life. They don't like lettuce. Oh, well. Right.
So are you bringing this up then at 5, or are you kind of waiting for a question?
No, it's a myth that your kids, so that's one of them. There's several myths. So one of them is like, if your kid asks, they're ready to know. They don't know what to ask. They're not in charge. Like, this is our responsibility to make sure that our kids have information about this. This is one of the biggest things we do in our lives. We are sexual from the beginning. We have relationships, all romantic and otherwise, throughout our lives. And so it is, we're embarrassed, we're ashamed, we don't have enough information, we don't know what to do with ourselves. And so we just skip it or dance around it, or like, oh, hey, you're gonna have a period, get along with that, sister. Not that bad these days, thank God. So yeah, it is not their job at all, ever. And one of the things that I found really sad essentially is that, we're hyper focused. Like, we know what kids need to learn. We understand their intellect and their social skills, and we know what they need to be, eating and exercising and all of that, which is all really important. But this is more important, I think, right? I don't know what trigonometry is exactly. I think it might involve cosines. Where's that going to get your kid? Where is it going to get them? Nowhere. Doesn't do anything for them. Like, makes their intellect bigger or something. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, soapboxing. But I yeah, and then again, like what you said, like, it's different now. So much more information, and it's safer for them. It's better for you. Like, imagine if you're, one of the things that I think you kind of alluded to, well, before we were recording, right? Is that we didn't have what we needed. We didn't have trustworthy adults that were in there like, all right, sister, here you go, my friend, here we go. And you can be that for your kid. You can be that for your kid.
I love that. I think so I have a 10 and 8-year-old, and the 10-year-old asked, I don't know, a couple years ago, and we kind of like started the talk. But I just always like think myself, like, am I saying the right thing? Like, what should we say to bring it up so we don't scare our kids or, shame them or whatever?
Freak them out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a couple things. So the first thing is that if you think about this as preparing your kids for this part of life, like, feel that mental shift, right? We're preparing them, right? We want them to be successful. We want them to feel good about who they are as a sexual person and in their bodies, and be safe and understand consent and all that business. So, so in order to not hurt them, upset them, scare them, you need to remember that we're preparing them, and they don't know what you know. So when you, like, maybe the first time you heard the penis goes in the vagina, you were 10 and you thought, dear God, no frickin' thank you. Right? And so it's gross, it's icky, no thank you. And that's still a thing. And that's still a thing. But if your person had said, okay, hey, you know what? This is a totally natural thing in terms of reproduction. People have sex for pleasure and fun most of the time. Sure, this is the main way babies are made, but it's a really great part of life. It's not for kids, it's for later in life. And it might sound gross to you, but that's because you're a kid. Someday, this might sound like fun. So part of that is your attitude. And if you just hear my tone, right? Hey, how's it going? Here's the weather. That's the other thing. If we mind our tone, right? Mind your tone. It's all parenting, mind your tone, which, is impossible sometimes. So yeah, it's a great question. And, we really get in our own way. We
Yeah.
get in our own way. Yeah. Yeah. Don't be afraid. Here's the good news. Like, for most of us, it is impossible for us to give our kids too much information. We just are not wired that way. So if you are talking to your child and you get sweaty upper lip, go you. You're on it. You're on it. And they don't know, right? They don't know. And so if you're in there first and saying, hey, this is a cool part of life, sure, there's trouble, right? Sure, there are things that can go sideways, but here we're going to make sure you're as ready as you can be and have the information and some skills to navigate this, right? It's a process. So yeah, thanks for asking that. I just really wish that we could see that, like, okay, I think about it as like a gap
Mhm.
between them and us, and that gap is full of crap.
Yeah. That's true.
I mean, that's kind of with any big serious talk you need to have with your children, right? It's kind of just your approach to it is what really is going to make or break it. Is there anything you can say that would shut down lines of communication or kind of make things worse?
Yeah. So a couple
Things to avoid.
things to avoid. So I would say, so things to avoid are kind of like techniques that don't work, right? So the things that work are being honestly practicing before you preach. So that's one thing that works. So having a sense of what you want to say before you say it. And my Sex Talks with Tweens book is all script. So that's one thing. Do not lecture them. right? So if you're like, hello, it's hump day, it's Wednesday, it's dinner time, we're going to talk about masturbation, right? It's just you're going to be like, no, thank you. No lecturing. Like, don't do to them what I'm doing with you right now. Think about it as one of my colleagues, Julie Metzger, says it's 200 or it's 2,000 2-minute conversations, right? Keep them really short and sweet. Their attention spans are not superb, right? Especially as they get older and they get uncomfortable. So if you are really conscious of how you're going to wade into these conversations, they're going to do better and feel better. If something happens and you hear something on the like the 69 thing, right? Let's just use that as an example. If that mom, she did a great job. If that mom had said, "What? Where did you hear that?" And oh my God, and you shouldn't know that. And you are too young, bad, right? Because what are you telling your child? The child, I'm a no-go, right? You can't talk to me. I'm a
Mhm.
freak show. So you're not trustworthy. And it takes practice, right? It takes practice. Like all parenting is practicing. Um, so, those are the things, and it's all us. And I hate to say that, but so much of it is us. But every child's temperament is different. So some kids cannot tolerate this. My child told me he would rather talk to strangers than about sex than me or his dad. But he would also never ask a question. So ask a question. So that was real good. Um, and he was just my belief now is that he was just doing that to make me crazy.
Oh, sure.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
that was my first thought.
totally, like, totally. I'm like, God damn it. So it made us sneaky. It made us sneaky. So I think, again, thinking about preparing them and also thinking about what are your hopes for them. Hopes are really inspiring, right? Like, what do you hope for them? And I'm all about the first sort of real sexual experiences. So, sex looks different and there's all kinds of different things to do that are sexual. If its last name is sex, it is sex. So helping them to be really ready, like understanding consent. How should you feel? Like, how should your partner be behaving? Like, what do do you want to do this? Does it feel good in your heart and your mind and your body? Like helping them understand like what that hopefully looks like. And a whole lot of finger crossing, right? Right. I mean, right. So anyway, does that help?
Yeah, I love the idea of thousands of 2-minute conversations because I think that makes it really scalable and kind of helps with the stages. Because obviously, the conversations you're going to have with a 5-year-old aren't the same you'll have with a teenager. And I think that's more reassuring. I feel like any parent can get in and out in 2 minutes and not like totally blow it all up and make anything worse. And you know that there's another 2-minute conversation coming somewhere down the line that you can maybe repair something you said or reframe something you said. And I think that makes it a lot more manageable.
Yeah, it totally is. And redo is fair game. You go back and you said that this mom, sorry, I don't like normally talk about 69 all the time, just heads up. But this mom, her email was, I danced around it. I think I just need to go back and fix it because I didn't quite do it right. And so redo is fine. And they appreciate it because when you say, hey, I'm sorry, I kind of messed that up. I want to do this again. Again, you're showing that you're trustworthy. You're showing that you're engaged. And when you start the conversations, um, it makes it, they don't like it necessarily, but it just shows them like, I'm in here. I'm here for you. I'm here for you. But if you say you can ask me anything and then you never say anything, they can't ask you anything because what do you know? Apparently nothing.
And I think punting is always an option too. Like, you know what? Let me think about how to explain this to you and I'll get back to you. I think that's a very underutilized technique.
And all things. But you have to get back.
Right.
You
Yes.
have to get back. And ideally you get back within 48 hours if you
For sure.
can. Right. I mean, life and all that nonsense. But yeah. So this is it's a learned skill for most of us. But oh wait, are we parenting? Oh yeah.
I Well, I always seem to get these conversations like at the worst possible time. Like, I would love to discuss this with you, but not while I'm cooking dinner and like trying to feed the dog and doing all these other things. Like, can we just like put a pin in this for a minute?
Yeah, yeah. And although one of the best times to talk to them is when you're doing something else.
Well, yes, that's true too.
So if you can get, if they're like, hey, this thing happened. I don't know what this means. Then you can say, okay, I'm just going to give you the brief, not the Reader's Digest version, because nobody knows what that is anymore. But I'm just going to give you a quick answer here. What do you think that means? Where'd you hear it? Here's a little taste, and then let's talk about it later.
Yes, keep your hands busy. That helps with the nonchalantness.
Oh, totally, totally. Totally. And people with penises in particular do not like this face-to-face thing.
Oh, they
Um,
don't.
no, they don't. The ovary havers do better with that.
So
Good
I'm
advice.
curious what you told the mom to do about the 69 situation.
Well, I haven't yet, but what I will tell her is I need to know some things. So how much does she know about sex, right? And does she know that people have sex for pleasure? Right. So that is something that we have got to attach to sex. It is for 99.99% of the time we're doing it for fun, right? Most of us who are having penis and vagina sex are no thank you to pregnancy. Maybe we've done that and we're done. Um, so they need to know that. They need to know that there are lots of different things people can do that are sexual, depending on the age of the child. So with this kiddo, I think she's 8. I would say, there's kissing, hugging, touching, body rubbing. And then sometimes, just very briefly, some people might put their mouths on other people's privates. It's not something that kids do. It's for later in life. And then I would, the 69 thing, I just have to think about this. I mean, we all know what that means, right? So they do it at the same time to each other would probably be enough. And it kind of looks like a 6 and a 9.
Mm.
I know it feels like a lot, but we don't want her Googling that. And then the other
Oh,
part of
right.
it,
Oh, no.
so the other part of this is that it was a kid at school who told her about it. Um, and he's not much older than her. So we don't want her to go back and say, all right, everybody, I got the goods on the 69. So,
I was informed.
here, let me draw you a picture. So saying, you know what, I'm telling you this because you asked me, but here's the deal. This conversation just needs to stay between you and me. Frankly, you can get in a lot of trouble for talking about this thing with other kids. Most parents don't know and aren't ready for their kids to know. And so I don't want you to get in trouble. And usually they're so grossed out, they don't want to share the good news. Um, but what you've done there is you've said, you can even say, I feel really uncomfortable talking to you about this. It's kind of a grown up thing, but I want you to know from me. And then breathe. And then in this case, that school needs to know that there's 69 chat happening.
Oh,
Right. Right. They need to know this kid is talking about 69. That is something that sure they might have heard, but it needs to be nipped in the bud.
yeah.
Nipped in the bud. And then not to be, I get in trouble for being sort of anti-Catholic occasionally, Catholic school. So it's sort of worse in some ways, right? Because of all the values and that kind of thing. And the other thing about private schools in general, they tend to be less willing to confront and deal with and handle this kind of thing. Public schools are like, and no, they're all over. It's a different, not every private school, absolutely not every private school, but just something that I've been doing this for 17 years. I have noticed this. I've noticed this over and over. And, it's not research, but, I have families that are like, this thing happened. We went to the school and they're like, oh,
Oh, God, that's terrifying.
no, it's terrible. I'm sorry.
But I love putting parameters on it that like this is a conversation in our family that some families are okay with. We're swearing has become a really big thing with my kids lately. And so this is also a conversation that's been very adjacent. It's like this is fine in our house, but like this is not something we're taking elsewhere. So
We talk about different rules in different settings all the time.
Yeah. With the swears and any kind of potty talk, what I said, what I told Milo was like, look, I get it that you want to say those words and they're funny and interesting to you, but the rule is, which is very important in this like 5 to 10, 11, 12, they want to follow the rules. The rule is that if you want to talk like that, bathroom, outside, away from adults,
Right.
Yes.
get in
Don't
trouble.
snitch on me.
I'm going to cross all the things. I think we might finally be out of the potty talk era in my house, and I'm thanking all of the things for that because I'm very done.
Like, and that's the other thing. It's like, shut up. Oh, wait, I can't say that. Well, you can.
Right.
Like, you just shut up. What say? Right? I don't want to hear it.
Well, and I feel like my tolerance is pretty like low. I guess I'm very immature when it comes to like a poop joke. So like I get it. I think they're funny, but it's like you've just taken it way too far.
Outside, no adults, not at school.
Yes. So, can you tell us a little bit about your new book, Sex Talk with Tweens, and what to say and how to say it?
Yeah. So over the years, one of the things that parents have said to me over and over is just tell me what to say. Just give me the words. And so it's the words. There are absolutely, there's my, I think 20, like my 20 sex talks commandments. So there's tips and sort of what to do, what not to do. And so there is information about how to have the conversations, but the majority of it is scripts, and it's done by section, like there's puberty and porn and reproduction and that kind of thing. And it's the words, and they're my words. And I tried to keep it sort of neutral, but I'm liberal and secular and cisgender and all those things. And so I really made an effort to keep it as values neutral as possible, although there are asterisks in certain situations where I asterisk and say, okay, blah, 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 and give my opinion. So the goal is for parents to read it, not the whole thing necessarily, but read it and just get some words. And the younger your kid is, you're going to hack some of the stuff off. The older they are, go for it. But it is what tweens need to know between 9 and 12. And it's going to feel like a lot, but that's fine, because the more that's coming from you, the better. Somebody did say, can I give this to my kid? And I was like, I don't care. Go for it.
But it
Um,
is written for parents, right?
Absolutely. And it
Okay.
is the words, right? It is the words. It is, masturbation. Masturbation is when a person touches their penis or clitoris for pleasure. It feels really good to their bodies. It's something that just about everybody does. It's a totally normal and natural thing. I believe it's important to get to know what feels good to your body, because later on, when you're having sex or doing sexual things with someone, you're going to know what feels good to you. You don't have to do it. Not everybody does it. It's called wanking, blah, 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 slang, slang, slang.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, so how, especially with tweens, how does the prevalence of social media change these conversations?
Ugh. All back channeling with all kinds of words and information, and we can't see it happening, especially as they get older. There's a great book called Behind Their Screens, which is really well researched and interesting in terms of what's happening for them. And of course, it includes a section on sexual harassment, sexting, which they call sharing nudes, which I didn't know, and porn and all those things. And so in this age range with tweens, a lot of what's happening is link share, hiccuping. A lot of what's happening is link sharing, and it's often porn. And so I'm a super fan of monitoring and filtering. It is required. It is not optional. It is required. It's like the seatbelt of the internet, right? So you'd never let your kid get in the car without a seatbelt. You should never let your kid get on the internet without monitoring. Monitoring tells you where they're going. Filtering chops out like all kinds of search terms. So porn, suicide, guns, all this awful shit that we've got going on. So they can't search that stuff. And as they get older, you can let the blocks go. And then by the time they're 13 or so, you can just take all the blocks off and let them go anywhere they want, but you're watching and they know you're watching. You're not spying. You're like, hey, you know what? So you can go anywhere you want, but we are going to get a ping if you Google big penis, right? Um, and we'll have a conversation. And so, parents don't believe me is heartbreaking. The episode that's whatever, I don't know what episode 141, I think, is a porn episode where I talk about, all of this and the impact and all that. So, social media, again, is a sort of back channel. And so your kids are going to see porn. Absolutely 100% guaranteed. Nobody makes it to 18 without seeing it. And it's your responsibility to make sure they're ready. They're going to see it. They're prepared, right? They're prepared.
Oof.
Sorry.
We have an episode, number 122 for our listeners. Also, we have an episode with Catherine Perlman who talks about kids and cell phones, and she has some great tips for setting up parameters and how to have that conversation too. So I think these two together would be a good listen for all you tween parents out there.
Well, everybody, frankly, doesn't matter how old your
Yes.
kids are, is you have to have the monitoring and filtering. The minute they can get on a device, it has to be there. And I highly recommend using a product like Bark or Custodio or Circle, because it's all in one. It's on your phone. You can turn the Wi-Fi off and on. You can see what's happening. It's really easy. And using the controls on each device is absolutely good. Works as well. It's just more to keep track of.
Okay, so you kind of mentioned earlier kind of keeping these conversations value neutral and kind of using your family's values when you bring up these conversations. How do you recommend having these conversations with children who are maybe have already identified as LGBTQ plus, or maybe somewhere in that spectrum, and or maybe you suspect that, or I mean, sexual orientation is much less taboo than it was even just a few years ago. And so I think the kids that we're raising are much more in tune with these things. And how would that change how you approach this topic?
So, as you're having the conversations, you always need to talk about different kinds of families, different kinds of relationships, different genders, so they know that you know about it, that you are open to talking about it, and that so that if they are queer, then they will be more likely to let you know and to talk with you about it. If you are of the belief that it is evil, wrong, and bad to be LGBTQ, just know it doesn't, well, everyone should know that those kids' suicide rates are 4 times higher than the general population. And I'm thinking no one wants that. And the one thing that keeps them on par with the general population is 100% parental support. Even if it bumps down to 95, we still see that high. It still makes an impact. And that can be really hard. It can be really hard. And people, I had a gal who's like, my kid's trans, and it's 3 years later, and I'm open to it. I'm still struggling with this. So there's lots of support for parents. My advice is to do your freak out on your own time. You can say, I'm really surprised. I don't know what to do with this. I love you. I need to figure this out. Can you help me understand? Like those kinds of questions. Saying things like, are you sure? A little judgy, right? But you might ask that. And this is a go back conversation. And kids these days are so much more open to different orientations and genders. It doesn't phase them. Like little kids, if they have a child in their class, like kindergarten through second grade, if they have a kiddo in their class that changes gender, is gender fluid, they have oh, okay, you're not a boy anymore. You're a girl. You have a new name. Okay, pretty much, right?
Oh,
The
it's
old
absolutely one of those situations where the adults make it worse.
Oh yeah, we're the worst. We're the worst. So just being as calm as you can and always having that, in the conversation. And pretty much everybody knows someone who's gay and out. And you can say, yeah, so Uncle Jim and Josh, they're married and they have a family, and kids know kids, and that's why we talk about the different ways to get pregnant, among other reasons, because lots of ways to get knocked up. So just being kind and clear as you're out in the world. And if you suspect your child might be something other than cisgender, which means that their physical body matches their gender identification. So I'm cisgender. You look at me and I feel like a woman. I look like a woman. And then I like men for the most part. I like women too, but mostly men. Um, Sorry, orientation went in there. So, and then my private areas are female. TMI, there you go. TMI. So just being mindful and having books and talking about it and showing up as open. And then if you need support, P Flag, Susan Berland, there's lots of folks that can help with your side of things, and they need you. They need you. And so the other thing is that this is lots of kids who are 10, 11, 12 are coming out, and it can feel like a kind of a trend. So we see just anecdotal. I have folks who have a group of girls, and they're all different genders and sexual orientations, and they're talking about it. And so what's happening, which is good, is that they just have a more expansive view of how to be as a sexual person and how to be in their gender. So we don't say experiment, we don't say phase, we say exploration, we say openness, and then you just wait. You wait and you roll with it. They change their pronouns, you change their pronouns. They change their name, you change their name. You have conversations about this with them. Like, how out are you? Do you want to do this at school? What's happening? And how are you feeling? Right. And then, as my pal Joe Langford says, you hold it lightly. But
Mm,
you have to believe them. You have to believe them. Even if you're thinking, just don't say that to them.
yeah.
Well, and I think there's a way to ask, are you sure, without actually asking that. You can, like you said, hold it lightly and let them explore and let them decide if they're sure. And
Yeah.
then,
Talk
yeah.
about it. How you doing? What does this mean to you? What's happening in your friend group? Just go with it.
Now, the next book you need to write is going to be for the parents of these children, to how to talk to their parents, because I feel like that's probably the biggest barrier, is explaining this to the older generation.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's lots of support and help for that already. That's not, I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. I ain't doing that. Um, my other book that is helpful is called Birds and Bees and Your Kids. And that's about to help you clarify your values. Like, what do you want your kids to know? How do you want to talk about this with them? And it is, again, like by section and that kind of thing, just because that's the first book I wrote, and it was kind of ahead of, I should have written this, the tweens book before I wrote this one. But people need to ground themselves. Parents need to ground themselves. And that book is a place where you can settle in. Because if you know your values and your hopes and, all that for your kids, it's a lot easier to have conversation. But if you're casting around, like, okay, I don't know what I think about gay marriage, but I should know what I think about gay marriage. I think it's fine. Do I really think it's fine? Right. Like, so finding a place where you feel settled in around that.
I love that. That sounds like a great starting point, and to help you really like establish what you think before you start having these conversations, or at least like I'm sure everyone knows what they think, but to put words to it and a vocabulary, so then you can then have these conversations with your children, I think would make it so much easier before you're already in it.
Totally. Because that closes the gap, that closes the crap, like less crap, and settles you down. And it's easy to talk about the facty stuff, right? It's easy to explain what a tampon is, right? That's easy, really easy, relatively speaking. Right. But talking about, mutual masturbation or being queer or consent, that takes a little more, right? Or the hard stuff like sexual assault and rape and sexual abuse, right? If you settle yourself down, it makes those conversations easier.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You are a joy. Can you tell our audience where they can find more about birds and bees and kids?
Yes. So birdsandbeesandkids.com. And then I have a podcast too. It's called Just Say This, and it's advice column style. So people call in, leave me a voicemail with a question, and then I answer it on the show. So if you like, Ask Amy and Carolyn and all that, then this is the total place for you. and it's soup to nuts. Like I have a call from a parent of a 3-year-old. I got a call from a parent of a 13-year-old, because I believe everybody can learn something from everyone. And so that's when, I mean, you're a podcast listener already, so that's where I'd recommend you go. And then Instagram and Facebook are both at Birds, Bees, Kids. And I do post a variety of things, including very funny sort of pictures of sexual stuff. Appropriate.
I feel like I just need to say, Amy got on the Zoom meeting today holding up a sign that says boner. So she's fine.
I did. I did. And I do classes for PTAs and all kinds of stuff. So,
Cool.
so if you want to, in the show notes, if you click on, there's a note where you can sign up for my newsletter, and there's a great freebie called 7 Tips to Rock the Talk. So,
Thank you.
yes, thank you for trusting me with your people.
If you like what you just heard, and we hope you do, you can find more of us online at www.okayestmoms.com. We're also on all social media platforms, Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Okayest Moms Blog. Or if you want to, you can send us an email at hey@okayestmoms.com.